time full of doubt, just believe. 'Cause there ain't that much difference between you and me. In a time full of war, be peace. In a world full of hate, be light. When you do somebody wrong, make it right. And don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine. In a world full of hate, be light.
In a place that needs change, make a difference. In a time full of noise, just listen.
Oh,
'Cause life is but a breeze, better leave it. In a place that needs a change, make a difference.
in a world full of hate, be light. When you do somebody wrong, make it right. Oh, don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine.
In a world full of hate,
Be light. Oh, la 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 In a race that you're in, don't slow down. Yeah, you only get one go round. Cross the finish line and hear the trumpet sound.
in a race that you're in, don't slow down.
In a world full of hate, be light.
Be light, yeah.
Somebody want it right.
Oh, don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine. In a world full of hate, be light. Yeah, it's hard to live in color when you just see black and white.
In a world full of hate, be light.
Welcome, American Heritage School friends and community, to a conversation that we're going to have today. My name is Grant Beckwith. I'm the principal at American Heritage School in American Fork. And we have with us some of our friends, neighbors, and employees of color at American Heritage School. I'll introduce them here shortly. We just wanted to give you an opportunity, because we have all been doing this here, to listen. It's a time right now of so much questioning and tumult and uncertainty, and we think that one of the best things that we can do is just share with each other thoughts, feelings in an unscripted way, and allow you all to be a part of that conversation and listening. Particularly, we're going to talk today on the topic of racial injustice and the protests and gatherings that have happened since the killing of George Floyd, and how that has impacted our families, our communities, our world. And so we thought we would bring some of our employees of color together and just listen to them and let you listen to them. We maybe want to start by saying, first of all, we're going to use some terms that we know have lots of different interpretations. We're going to talk about the term Black Lives Matter as well as the organization Black Lives Matter, and there's differences and people interpret those words differently. We hope as you listen that you can put aside judgment and maybe just feel what each individual is feeling about words. Words are so clothed with meaning and context and history that what you or I bring to it might be very different than what our neighbor brings to that word or that phrase. And so we'll ask you, we had a prayer before we started to set judgment aside and maybe just open your heart and feel what these individuals are saying. So let's introduce our guests today. Not really guests to us because we work together every day. We'll start with Amy Holmes, who is our varsity girls soccer coach. Next, we have Poda Winatana, who is our boys varsity basketball coach, also on our girls basketball coaching staff and our assistant athletic director. And then Yahosh Bonner, who is our athletic director at the school. We love them each, and we're grateful that they were willing to kind of come and put themselves out here. This is not easy to talk about. This is risky. Let's just be upfront about that, because we know that there are many who will, of course, form judgments when they hear. That's kind of a natural human thing to do. But we're confident that this is a really important conversation that we should all be a part of. So I will ask them each to introduce themselves a little bit more briefly before they answer the first question. But the first question will be, how would you summarize your recent thoughts and feelings about the global protests and gatherings for racial equality? And why don't we start with you, Amy? And if you want to tell anything else about yourself or your background that might be helpful for our audience, you can start with that and then answer that question.
Okay. My name is Amy Holmes, and I am half black, half white. I've got a little bit of Native American, a couple other things as well. But I believe that it has been needed for a very long time to have this justice. I think that it has to be established and moved forward, not only for those who have been killed but in cold blood, but something set in stone and in law. I think that police officers or anybody else, that they need to be held accountable for their wrongdoing. So.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. Poda, how would you summarize your thoughts and feelings of late?
Well, first of all, kia ora koutou.
Put that microphone right up to you.
sorry.
There you go.
First of all, kia ora koutou, ko Paula Winitana tōku ingoa, no heretanga ki Waimarama, no Aotearoa ahau.
I'm not sure they'll understand that, but
Yeah.
you're going to translate, I'm sure.
I am. He me mahau no ta hai o i karati o nā rā muri nei. No te mena he tomaiti o ta ato ahau, no reira e huri tōku reo tuaru ki te Pākehā or English. My name's Paula. I'm from New Zealand. My heritage is of New Zealand Māori, so I'm of Māori culture. And I've been here I arrived in January, right? And so it's a blessing to be here. But my first thoughts when I came across this situation with George Floyd and, that brutal scene that I think we all will never forget. I can see how a lot of people are reacting to that situation. But for me, I'm not black, I'm brown, and it was just, I thought it was going to be a great opportunity for something to happen. I didn't know this would happen. And so, Heavenly Father, He works in mysterious ways, right?
Amen.
And I can see how this is going to help. It's going to educate, and I've done that with my own family since this. Like, I don't know about you guys, I'm sure you have. Just sit around and talk to the table about, hey, how are you guys feeling here? We're new to this country. Are you feeling, do you have any of these feelings where people treat you differently or have had any racism kind of gestures pointed towards you? And so it's created an opportunity for us to talk, to learn about not only racism but American history. So that's what I thought when I first come across this incident, and I think you were my first one I called. And I think it's an opportunity for us to be better, to stand taller. I really do.
Thank you, Poda. Yahosh.
Yahosh Bonner. I'm African American. I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans who helped build this country. I love this country. I love the school. I love so many of the things that are happening in the world. I love that these conversations are happening, they're tough. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. But for people to acknowledge that, wait a minute, there's an issue, there's a problem, people are hurting, people are suffering, and to see so many of my brothers and sisters respond with love, with kindness, mourning with those that mourn, comforting those who stand in need of comfort, has been really encouraging to me. But like I said, with these conversations, they're uncomfortable sometimes, and they get intense and emotional. And so I've kind of been emotionally drained and then brought up and then emotionally drained, but I'm just grateful that I feel like there's, like you said, Pauda, that there's going to be change. And Amy, I totally agree with you. Every person needs to stand accountable for what they've done, you know. And for me in my household, like you, I've had to make sure that I'm talking to my kids and to my wife and letting them know, hey, law enforcement, for the most part, they're great. They are great. Some of the best people are in law enforcement, but there are some that don't represent them well, you know, and that's just like with people of color, white people, anybody, you know, and so you can't judge a whole organization, a whole people based on the acts of a few. But we do also have to acknowledge that as there's a pattern in things, that we have to understand that there's a problem and things need to be changed. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have these conversations with my friends, with my family, my brothers and sisters, and to share my experiences and to help push along the conversation and encourage others to have it.
Our next question is, how can I stand up for racial equality when I see racial injustice? And I'll invite you to be as personal as you can about how you have experienced it in our own community, because I think that's also a part of this question. Does it exist in our community? I'm not just talking about American Heritage. I'm talking about American Fork. I'm talking about Utah County. I'm talking about Utah, our country. So, you know, be as personal as you're comfortable being here. How can I stand up for racial equality when I see racial injustice? Let's go in reverse order this time. Yahosh?
Yeah, so, gosh, I have so many experiences that I could share that deal with this. Ones where even I had an opportunity to stand up, you know, for a friend of mine. And actually, he reminded me of this on Facebook. I read one of his comments because people are sharing their experiences right now. They're showing their hearts, and people are listening. And he's African-American like me, and there was, on our basketball team, there were 3 or 4 of us in Mesa, Arizona, and my junior and senior year. And anyway, he was a good ball player, wasn't liked very much by his JV coach. He felt that it might have been racial because he said some things to him that he didn't say to the other players, that he felt that was warranted. And he said that during tryouts, his junior year, my senior year, where I was a captain, varsity, he said that one of the kids called him the N-word. And that his just reaction, he hit him. And he got suspended from school, missed the tryouts, and the coach did not put him on the team. And me as a captain, looking back, I had an opportunity to say something like, hey, coach, I don't think this is right. Can we look at it this way? I could have talked to my coach on varsity about what happened to you know, one of my friends who was on JV. And, you know, I didn't, you know, because I just looked at it as, oh, a fight, you know, and I didn't look more into it and ask Jarrett what his side of the story was. So there are times where all of us maybe had an opportunity to say something and we didn't. You know, my first experience with racism. I just moved from Las Vegas, and I was at my friend's birthday party in Farmington, Utah. And well, I was talking with a young lady, and we were having fun, we were laughing. But then a girl that I knew from school came, and I really wanted to talk to her. And I was like, okay, I'll see you later. And I started talking to my other friend. Well, the person that I was first talking to, she didn't seem like she appreciated that. So I saw her kind of going around the room from group to group, whispering and talking to people. Next thing I know, someone's throwing a drink on me, you know. Then cups thrown at me, and then racial slurs slung my way. And I had never experienced that. I was the only African American or person of color at the party, and I remember the feelings that I felt then vividly. you know, and that's an experience that so many people have, you know. But I do remember that none of my friends said anything. You know, guys that I played basketball with, went to school with, these were my buddies, and they didn't say anything. Martin Luther King said, in the end, we won't remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And that's why I'm so grateful that these conversations are happening, that people are speaking up, because we hear you even when you're not speaking. We see that, and it means so much when you stand up for us and when you see something that you call it what it is.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Yosh. Poda.
Thanks for sharing, man. That's pretty powerful there. I think what you said is enough. Like, if you see something, say something. But more importantly, do something. But
I like that.
as simple as
Yes.
that may seem, that can be the hardest, like you said, to have the courage to speak up when you see, whether it's racism or just any kind of, what's that word we were talking about the other day? And I asked, what does it mean? Bias or bigotry or whatever? Prejudice. Sorry, my vocab, you know. But I mean, whenever you feel someone who's not treated right, fairly or equally, I mean, it's hard to speak up, you know. And I've had many opportunities to do that, and I didn't follow through. And like you said, even though you don't say something, the people who need it most, they hear it loud and clear, or they feel it. And so, I mean, courage comes to mind, you know. Courage is only present when things are down, you know, when fear is present, because if it's easy and there's nothing to be afraid of, you don't need it. And so we need to be more courageous as people of color, black, white, brown, everybody. Just the whole world right now needs to be more courageous to say something when they see something, but more so follow through and do it. Because, they remember the words, they remember the silence, but they remember actions too.
Yeah.
So,
And I will say that if I'm so grateful that my friend was so forgiving, because in the comments I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have done something. And he said, I just really appreciate you now, because we've been friends ever since then. We were still friends. We were good friends, you know. And he said, I'm so grateful that you acknowledge that, you know. And me looking like it's done, like there's no redemption for that. That time has passed. But just hearing him say that he forgave me and that he's grateful that I acknowledged that. So if there is something that maybe you could have said in a situation, I think it's okay to go back and apologize. Last week, one of my friends that were at that party, you know, reached out to me. Hey, how you doing? I was just thinking about you, you know. I want to let you know I love you and I love your family, you know. And 10 years prior to now, he had reached out to me, and we hadn't spoken forever. And he said, hey, I'm just so sorry. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I said, it's all right. Like, we're good. And so there's so much that can be healed by opening your mouth, by sharing your feelings.
Amy, can I just say something before you?
Of course.
So, great point. I think like riding a bike or like shooting that first hoop for the first time, you know, it's a struggle, right? The first time you do it, but the more you do it, the better you become. Like a skill, right? And this is kind of like a skill, a teaching time that we all are going through, right? And so even if, like you said, if we don't say something in that moment, that's okay. Get ready for the next moment, or say it after. You know, because sometimes we fail, and when we fail and we give it our best effort, I think that's the best failure. But when we fail and we don't care and we don't kind of bring it to our attention and try and get better, I think that's the worst type of failure in terms of this type of topic anyway. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with what you said. Just never being silent and, you know, using your voice even on social media, posting positive things, but bringing it to everyone's attention, letting everyone know where you stand, I think is important. Educating your family, your circle, teaching your kids, I think helps a lot. Being open to talk about it is huge, and it's hard and uncomfortable, but it can put a stop to a lot of things. my husband had an experience at work where some guys, were saying the N word, and they probably didn't know that his wife was, half black or whatever, but it offended him, and he wasn't silent. He spoke up and said, hey, can you stop saying that? And they might have said it somewhere else, but they didn't say it in front of him. They had respect, and I think that it's hard. It is hard to stand up, but you have to. I think that to bring change, you're not going to be comfortable to bring about change. So.
And would we all agree the more we do it, the easier it becomes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Even with racism and black-white issues,
Right.
and
It's that muscle that keeps getting worked, and it's going to
Muscle
become
memory.
easier. The more you play soccer, the better you're going to become at it. The more you speak up for someone, or have someone's back in a situation like that, instead of just watching it happen, it's going to become easier, and you can change.
It's hard to even know the right words to use sometimes because words are so charged. So, for example, before we started this, I asked them, do you feel comfortable with my referring to you as persons of color? And they all said yes. Some of us aren't sure whether we should say black or African American. And so sometimes that uncomfort causes us to not even have the conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm talking to 3 people right here who are so gracious. You say the wrong thing and they love you anyway. And this is the way I have known and loved most persons of color in my life that I have known. They've been so much this way. If I, with real intent, want to love them and hear them, so forgiving if we use the wrong word or we're still learning, and then it does get easier, right?
Yeah.
Amy, I do love what you said about you had so many solutions and things to do, talking to your circle, to people,
Family.
Yeah, your family, people that are connected to you. I mean, gosh, there's so many people that would listen to me, but they're not going to listen to me the way they would listen to you or Grant to you.
Right.
I mean, for years we've been saying, hey, our lives matter. Hey, we want equality. We want to exist. We want that freedom, but until someone that looks like you, frankly, Mr. Beckwith, says it or stands up, things are going to happen. In slavery, the enslaved Africans didn't say, hey, okay, we're done. That's it, and it was over. No, it took people, good white people that didn't look like us, to make that movement. So we really appreciate this conversation.
A William Wilberforce, an Abraham Lincoln, someone who was visible, who would say, I'm listening, right?
Yeah.
Let's go on to our third question. How does it feel to be the only one like you in your class or community? Amy?
Oh, how's it feel? I'm trying to think of a story or something. I think that, I guess for me, I never really felt different. Does that make sense? I guess even though other people see it, that I'm different or I don't look like them or something like that, I just trying to fit in. But there was a time at R.C. Willey when I worked there that I was treated fair with everybody else, and as soon as the boss that I had at the time found out that I had black or was biracial, she was raised in the South, and she just started treating me different. She just started treating me unfair and would make comments, and my coworkers would stand up for me, and I guess you could say had my back through that. But I was able to endure and stick it out, even though it was hard. Sorry. And she was talked to by the manager, and I was grateful that I had people on my side and I could get through it and endure to the end. Because I don't feel that you're born with hate. I feel like that's something that you've been taught or you've learned. Thank you. And I know that people can change, and there's always a second chance. You know, people can be taught correctly. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Poda, how does it feel to be the only one like you in your class or community?
You feel alone. You feel kind of sometimes scared. You know, it can be a very, very interesting experience when you go through something the first time and you feel like you're the only one left out. I remember when I first arrived here, and I spoke to you and Blaine, remember? And I was saying, so, okay, I know you can't call people black and white here, because in New Zealand you can. There's no kind of bad connotation for my people anyway. And you guys educated me about that, right? And you're saying, yeah, just call them by their number or their name. And it took me a while, right? Because
as a coach, identifying players on the court, like, hey, that.
Sorry.
So
Thanks for explaining.
Yeah.
And it took me for a while because, like, kind of like you, sometimes you don't feel like you're the odd one out, or you know, you're the only one there, just because of your color or how you look, you know. And so when I came here, that's how I kind of viewed everybody. Right. And so to learn about, you know, how you communicate without offending people was quite interesting. And
I would love to get there. I would love for us just to be able to, as humans, one race, human race. That would be amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, like, people of color matter. Black lives matter, right? All lives matter. And so to be able to say that word black and not offend people, I just want to make sure everyone knew that, hey, there's no ill feelings towards you because you're darker than me or anything like that, right? Or because we look different, or we're the only one in this environment that's, you know, just different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it can be lonely, it can be scary, it can be awkward. But I have to admit, since being here in January, and I've spoken to a lot of you, I haven't felt that here at American Heritage at all. I haven't felt that here in Utah. And I've had discussions with people who have felt that, but for me and my family, we haven't. So, yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's good. Yehosh, what does it feel like to be the only one in your class or community?
A lot of emotions. A lot of emotions. So what an honor to represent my faith and my people as a black man. You know, here at American Heritage is amazing. The people here are some of the best people I've ever met, you know, in my community, meaning, you know, Spanish Fork, where I live, American Fork, just the people that I interact with. But there's also a weight to it. I feel like, okay, I have to watch how I speak. I have to make sure that I'm in the right place. I have to make sure, I feel like because of who I am, people are going to look at me and then make judgments based on their interaction with me, which isn't right, and I shouldn't feel that way. I should feel free to just be myself. But I feel like there is a weight because I'm different. I'm a minority, and I've been a minority most of my life, you know, and so there's a weight there and a responsibility that is heavy. But there's also, I feel so honored to be able to testify and to be able to share what I know about the gospel, about my experiences with people that don't look like me, and specifically people that do look like me, that are here in this country, because there's so many blessings that I've received because of my faith, because of my interactions and the people that I'm connected with. And so there's a lot of difference, you know, nervous, excited, proud, scared, you know, just so many different emotions. So that's, you know, a big question, but thank you for asking that because I feel all those things.
Yeah. May I just ask, before we move on to the next question, Poda, you mentioned that Black lives do matter, and Black lives do matter. And then you said, and all lives matter, and all lives do matter, right? I think we all get that. Could you maybe respond to how you feel sometimes when people say Black lives matter, but all lives matter? Because I know that is a common refrain in response to the phrase Black lives matter. People will sometimes say, but all lives matter. what kind of feelings, what kind of thoughts do you have about those two phrases? And I'm sure Poda can take whatever you have to say here in love and the intent. You've felt his. He loves you, right?
And I think that's a big part of it is because I know my brother and I know his heart, and he has shown me nothing but love, and that's why when he says that, I know he understands, like, hey, I care about you and your family. I care about you and your people and your Black community, And so when he says Black lives matter and all lives matter, I understand that from him. But from when I say Black lives matter and someone says, oh, all lives matter, well, of course, of course they do. Every single life. But I say Black lives matter because of what's been going on in our country. These things that are happening with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, it's not new. Yeah. It's not new.
Right.
And fortunately, people are seeing that and speaking up and wanting change. So for people to value my life and to say, yes, you're right, Black lives do matter. You matter, Yehosh. Your family matters. It means so much to me. And it's hard for some people to kind of understand why I'm saying that. But I've talked to a lot of my friends, and we've came up with different ways of explaining it. So say we're on the same street, right? And your house is on fire. And the fire department comes and they're putting out your house. They're putting out your house with water, right? And I come out of my house and like, hey, what about my house? My house matters. I want some water on my house. What about me? Give my house some attention. Well, of course, they're not going to change where they're putting out the fire, because that is the house that's in danger. That is the house that's burning down to the ground, right? Yeah. And so it's just that our Black lives need attention right now. For so long we've asked for, not even equality. We just want to exist. We just want to feel safe. Yeah. I have had conversations with my kids that I just don't see happening with other households. I go through with my kids. Hey, I have to make sure I ask these questions. Hey, how do you feel about police officers? We love them. Great. What if a police officer tells you to sit down? What are you going to do? I'll sit down. Okay, how are you going to refer to them? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. My kids know these things because they have to do everything right. And even with doing everything right, being pulled over or being in a bad situation, there's still no guarantee that they're going to come home alive. And I'm more worried about that for my children than most people would be, just because of the color of our skin.
Yeah, and I'll say as a white father, I've never had that conversation with my children, and I don't think it's necessary. But you sure do, and so many Black fathers and mothers whom I know feel like they have to have that conversation with their children from the time they're very young. And that's racial inequality. There it is. There's an example.
So before we came to America, just your experience, you can ask my wife, what video did I watch most? And it was when you get pulled over by a cop.
Is that? Yeah.
So it's quite interesting because you just want to know, I'm not African American, but I'm brown, right? And you see people of color get pulled over by cops. And I know media controls a lot of this narratives to a point, right? Yeah. And sometimes they just show all the bad, but there's a message within there, and so to your point, you haven't had that discussion. I've had that discussion, and I'm not Black with my children because we're of color here in America. Just because you never know, and with what happened to George Floyd and all these other people, I don't know the others who have passed away. I know there's been a few or a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But this George Floyd experience, like I said, it's an opportunity for us to. Heavenly Father's using it as an opportunity for us to come together and to uplift our Black community. But to teach all, and so we had that opportunity as well.
Yeah. Next question, or was there any other on that question? Maybe I didn't get all the way through on that one. How does it feel to be the only one? That's the one that we asked. Did everyone get to answer that or other thoughts? Okay, so next question. What can I do to understand the history of racism in the United States and around the world? Any of you that want to start on that one?
I love what Amy said. I really, you when we asked the question earlier, you just rattled off a bunch of things that I was just like, yes, with your family. what are you doing within your family? I mean, our leaders, our church leaders say that the most important work that you can do is in the walls of your own home. And I believe that to be true, especially with this. So what are you putting in front of your children? What kind of books are you having them read? Are they books that represent the world and the people, all the different kinds of people in it? Are you actively looking for other relationships that are not like you, that people that don't look like you, come from different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, are you actively engaging in those conversations? I think a lot of times we think that racism is intentional, right? But we're actually programmed every day by the things that we see, by the conversations that we engage in.
The music that we hear.
Absolutely. And so it's important for us to be intentional about what we consume in terms of our friendships, our TV, television, our music, the books that we're allowing our children to read or that we're reading ourselves, so that we can give our children a more diverse perspective. I think that is so important. Education is so important. So I think that's important. And then, also teaching them about history. I'm so grateful for Black History Month. Maybe one day we won't have to have it, and it will be so ingrained, because Black history is what?
It's American history.
Yeah. We're here. We're brothers. We built this country together, and so I think, having those open conversations and really starting that education in the home, like you said earlier, Amy.
Well, any other thoughts on that? What can we do to learn the history of racism or racial inequality in our country and around the world? Any other thoughts there?
We have the internet. I mean,
Google.
yeah, and obviously check the sites that you're looking at, because some of them have things that aren't so true. So you want to make sure that you're looking at credible sites, but again, it's intentionally looking for this information, and I think there's just so many people that are not learned about, that have contributed to the world and their inventions and their music and their dance and their artistry. There's so much beauty in the world that's diverse that we miss if we don't look for it.
Yeah.
As someone coming to America, just arriving and learning about not only the history of it, but how this whole thing is where we're at right now. Who was it? Bruce R. McConkie said, knowledge precedes faith. We've got to learn about something before we can have full faith in something. And so for me, like you said, the internet, right? Books, good books, or the best books, right? Not just any book. And making sure the source is, credible, that's of the beliefs and the standards that you have as parents, I think. Because there's some interesting things out there, right? About racism, culture, different perspectives. So I think we need to be careful about what sources we turn to when we're learning at this time.
All right. Let's move on to our next question here. Why are so many people around the world gathering and protesting in support of the Black Lives Matter movement? What is it about this particular moment? What is it about the Black Lives Matter movement that has generated so much momentum?
I think a lot of people know people that have been affected by it, and just all races are coming together because they see the social injustice, and standing together can stop racism and bigotry, and I think people are just coming together to try to make change.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and the world is so much smaller with technology, Facebook, YouTube, that what happened being caught on a phone video camera, everybody has access to it. And as a human, you can't help but, wow, what's happening? Yeah. He's not resisting. He's calling for his mom. I think that people are feeling whoa, this is human suffering, And there's so much good in humanity, and I think people are okay, we need to act. What can I do? People want to know, what can I do? And There and because of social media and because of the internet, because of the news, people are getting answers. Oh, I can get out and walk. I can create a sign. I can make a post.
Right.
You know, back in the day, you have to really risk your life, but now people can just write, okay, this is how I feel. This is where I stand, and share it with their community. And so I think that people are seeing that there's something that they can do, and people that have a voice are using it.
Yeah.
And because, like I said, this world is so small now. Like, we have friends. We all have. Most of us are connected with a person of color. And some of us aren't. And those of us who aren't, I encourage you to reach out to somebody, meet somebody. Because Grant, me and you, we had a talk. We have a lot of talks, and
I love those talks.
Yeah, me too, and I appreciate them. Thank you so much. And you gave me Abraham Lincoln quote. Can you share that here?
I don't like that man. I must get to know him. That's how Abraham Lincoln described the process that he felt like he needed to go through when he recognized in himself dislike for another human being. I don't like that man. I must get to know him.
Okay.
If we can see people the way that those who love them see them, the way ultimately that God sees them and us, changes everything about how we like each other.
Yeah. Amen.
That's true, because I think
Amen.
it's easy to find things that you don't have in common, or your dislikes, or about somebody else. But if you can really look deeper and find something you have in common, it has nothing to do with your skin color.
Right.
Just getting to know somebody, being a friend to them, and finding a common ground. And I really do believe that there are more good people in this world than bad. So
Totally.
it takes all of us.
Yeah.
I think it's, time and a season for all things. And the season's been happening for a while now, and people have been hush or quiet about this racial situation, and now's the time. People are speaking up. Any time's the right time to say the right thing. But sometimes it's not received or kind of accepted. And once again, the situation is just create an opportunity for those voices to be heard, for our black community to be supported and uplifted at this time. And I'm really excited about what's going to happen for the good.
I've received so much love from people within our community, my fellow teachers and even students, and it means so much. And there's not only one way you can help or be a part of the movement of just loving your brothers and sisters, or understanding, even if you still don't agree how things are going, how can you understand more? There are ways that you can find to understand and to learn. But if you're someone who doesn't want to, if you don't even have social media, you don't have to post. If you don't, have that access, there's still other things that you can do in educating yourself, educating the people around you, just a conversation like this, because like we said, it's hard, it's uncomfortable. People are waiting to attack, they're just waiting. And so I understand people being reserved and not saying anything. I understand how that must feel, but I do appreciate and see you who are speaking up, and I appreciate it. My family appreciates it, but I don't want to say like, it's easy, just do it, everybody does it. Like, right. No, I understand it's not easy. It's not hard. And I don't want to force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. That's just not right. But, encouraging these conversations, I think a conversation is something that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say that if you felt awkward in the past and it's been difficult, I think this is the time where you can try, right?
True.
More than ever, because this is a great opportunity to discuss it now, why it's fresh, why it's right in our face. And it's always been there, but right now it's just different. Yeah, so
It's a window of opportunity. It's asking for the conversation right now instead of pushing it, right? The next question is, how can I support law enforcement and my brothers and sisters of color? In other words, how do I do both? How do I show support for both of those? Who would like to start on that one?
I'll give it a go. So my upbringing was quite interesting, right? I'm a convert to the church. I didn't join till the missionaries knocked on the door when I was 14 years of age. But I shared at a devotional one time a little bit about my upbringing. And so my dad, he's been involved with probably the biggest gang in New Zealand my whole upbringing. And so all that experience that you have is real, right? When it comes to violence or domestic violence, seeing, within the home, physical abuse, drugs, alcohol was just normal. You just see it everywhere. And also, to your point, the question about the police. And so my perspective growing up in that kind of upbringing, my worldview on that was different to everyone else because of my experiences. And so, like, for example, the police, if you ask your analogy of the fire engine, or if your house is in trouble or if you need help, you'd normally call them. We wouldn't, because our experiences weren't good. And it doesn't make it right. My perspective is just because anytime I saw the police was, on a monthly raid, they'll come to our home and search through the house and mess it up and don't clean it up. And then they'll leave and we'll have to clean it up. Or I'll see them arrest my dad. And so you wouldn't call those people for help, right? And as you grow, and you just kind of like institutionalized by your environment, right? And that's just your way of thinking. Is it right? No. Is it true? Maybe to a point. In this example, this one police officer, right? He represents the whole police, even though his actions aren't accurate of every police officer.
Not reflective. You're
Yeah.
talking about the police officer who kneeled on George Floyd's neck.
Exactly. And so, as you grow and you learn and you experience more outside of your kind of environment, you realize that, hey, they're not all like this, and you can support them for the right things that they do. And at the same time, your family and your friends, your brothers and sisters, once again, I keep coming back to it as an opportunity to help them understand. Just because a member of the church acts like that doesn't mean that's the teachings of the church.
Right.
Or someone who's brown or black or white acts like that. But you can't hide behind the fact that what they do or what they did was wrong, and they have to be accountable for that, like anybody would. And so I think we can, and I think there's a way to do it. And to your point about the quote with Abraham Lincoln, become a friend with some of them, learn more about them, go into their world. I've talked to you all this, last 4 months. I've got a lot of my friends are black back home, African Americans, because they come and play basketball, and it's just funny how you kind of just connect, right? And so I'm grateful for my black brothers and sisters that I know, and I don't really look at it as color, but I'm saying it now because I'm here in America. It's weird. It's interesting, but yeah.
I think we can too. I think we can, and I think we should, definitely honor the police that are doing their job and doing it the right way, which are most of them,
Putting themselves in harm's way and saving us from harm in so many ways, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that, but then we also acknowledge the injustices that have happened, and then we suggest and research opportunities to help make things better in terms of reform, in terms of training, voting for, people who are looking to make things better, with law enforcement, to give them more tools so that they can use, so they can make or reprogram themselves to change some of the bias that we all have programmed within ourselves. So I think it's important that we do both and that we don't feel like we have to pick a side. Just pick the side of humanity, pick the side of right, and look at it at each situation, and then I think it's easy for us to say, this is where I'm standing, even if I'm wrong, this is where I'm standing. I think a lot of us are doing that, But I think it takes a huge person to say, you know what, this is what I believed before. But now that I have more knowledge, more information, and a greater perspective, I can empathize. I can understand, you know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Amy, anything on that one?
I think that was perfectly put. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last question. How do I speak and interact with friends, family, and neighbors who may be insensitive to racial injustice? And what is the best way to be an example and take a stand?
Who wants this one?
Whose question was that?
Whose question was that, he asks. The questions, by the way, I should just say, the questions came not only from Yehosh and Poda and Amy, but also from, thinking that we have as a Commitment to Care Committee, which Yehosh is on. As a school, we care a lot about this topic. How do I speak and interact with friends, family, and neighbors who are insensitive to racial injustice, and what is the best way to be an example and take a stand?
With love. You do it with love, and you don't condemn. I think people will put walls up when you're like, you're wrong, or you're not doing things the right way. But just with love, like, hey, you know what? You said this to me the other day. Kind of hurt my feelings, and this is why. This is how I felt when you said this. Even though I'm not this, I know people that are like this, and that's not true. So when things are said, address it. Yeah. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. But like we said earlier, you're going to get better at it. You're going to be more tactful about it. But I think it's important that we address things in love and hoping that they might change, but not just condemning them and judge them based on just what they said right there. You're a horrible person because you said this. Oh, maybe you didn't understand what you said. Just in case you didn't understand what that meant, this is what it means.
Right.
And I didn't appreciate that. I think it's so important for your family to know, your friends to know how you feel about issues about racism and about really wherever you stand politically. People should know how you feel. And when you share how you feel, you do it with love and not condemning. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good. And maybe asking them why they feel that way or where they're coming from. Maybe getting to know their story a little bit more can help you understand. Yeah. And then, go forward with love and come, to a common ground together, maybe could help.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Prayer works, I bear testimony of that. And so, every morning I think if we have the Spirit to be with us and charity is our guide, right? It can navigate us through these awkward situations, even when you're speaking with a colleague or a student or a friend or a neighbor, and this situation comes up where what they say you might not feel is 100% right or correct. Heavenly Father will guide us through that. But be sincere, be loving, I think is the great way. And if they receive that message well, and you've done your best effort to share your perspective, to share what you believe, it's like missionary work, right? No one's always going to accept the message.
That's true. And
it might not be that time, but we have to take advantage of that opportunity to teach. As daunting and as scary it may be, like we've kind of acknowledged, right, the first time, the more we do it, the better we'll become. Let charity be the guide. We'll be all good.
And Grant, I would love to hear more from you about what you think about some ways to educate those that we know that maybe have different ideals, or whether solutions that you might have or experiences that you might have, because I think it's awesome to hear, all of ours, people of color's voices. But, like I said before, a lot of times we can't reach people that you can.
Yeah. I think a lot about the honor code scripture that we use as a school. Love God with all your heart, might, mind, and strength. And this is the first great commandment. The second great commandment is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And I think loving our neighbor as we love ourselves means getting to know our neighbor as well as we know ourselves. And I have just found that whenever I was afraid of someone or uncomfortable or didn't know, I just getting to know them breaks those barriers and that fear down. And love replaces it. Love casts out that fear. I was just thinking about this question about law enforcement. You know, law enforcement and you know, our beloved family members and friends of color. Or do we really need to choose between them? And if we feel like law enforcement officers are doing some things that make us afraid, how do we get to know them too, right? I was actually thinking as you were talking about, it might have been nice to have Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Wright, who are in this conversation, who are law enforcement officers who protect our American Heritage School community. They've saved lives, including here.
Next week, same time.
Yeah. And
Tune in.
and I would recommend for anyone who's having a hard time balancing this question, come talk to one of these people. Come talk to Mr. Wheeler or Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright is our new security director at the school. He was the former police chief at Fairview Police Department, and he helped found the Saratoga Police Department. And he knows the good and the bad and the ugly of what it means to be a police officer. And you know the good and the bad and the ugly of what it means to live with racism and be a person of color. That second great commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself, means knowing thy neighbor as thyself. So I'll just leave it right there. There's a lot more that can be said, but
Love it.
all right. Well, thank you for listening. For those of you who stuck with us for the whole hour, we hope that you found something that's worth it. Even if there's one idea here that helps your home, your heart, your family, your community, we think it was worth an hour. So thank you to each of you for joining us, Yehosh and Poda and Amy. And we'll see you all around the campus.